The principles of justice and humanity. My father-in-law, the Honorable Justice N.P. Thacker, didn't like me using the official car for personal reasons. Born in Myanmar, with a silver spoon in his mouth, Justice Thacker once had a thriving practice as a lawyer, but an underlying urge to serve society prompted him to leave it and join the judicial services at a rather measly pay, overlooking the fact that he had a large family consisting of 9 children, aged parents, and one sister. He had always been moved by the suffering of the poor and needy and firmly believed that humanity should be man's highest credo. The man of principles, ethics, and morals, he never swerved from them and strived to make his family members tread in the same path. And so on that day, despite my panic and tickling of the clock, he was adamant of not allowing me to use the official vehicle. I finally managed to reach the airport on time in another car, of course, but his stringent attitude had upset me. When I reached the airport, I just met Justice such said, a friend of my father-in-law's who had retired from the judiciary and had started practicing in the Supreme Court. I paid him my respects and boy started talking. We suddenly became very emotional and started narrating an incident. Last week, I was representing a client in the court of the 2-judge bench comprising Justice Tucker and another judge. The client was the tenant of the widow. My client had not paid the rent for a year, and that is why the landlady had filed the practitioner case for recovery of rent. Justice Tucker was inclined towards the tenant, while the other was pro-landlord. Everybody in the court was waiting for the judgment. According to the Rent Act, the tenant was bound to pay the rent on that particular day itself. The total outstanding rent was 10,000. This was a hefty amount at the time this incident took place, equivalent to a month's salary of the Supreme Court judge. When the judgment was delivered, it favored the landlady and the tenant was ordered to pay the complete amount the very same day. I was particularly upset with the judgment, and I was sure that Justice Tucker would consider the difficulty of the tenant. By evening that day, I and my client were almost in tears, worried about how he would pay the rent. Just as we were discussing the distressing situation, the doorbell rang. A peon from Justice Tucker had come to the office with an envelope which he handed over to me. Enclosed was a check of rupees 10,000 along with a note that read, "When I am presiding as a judge, I have to abide by the duties of a judge, but I cannot forget that I am also a human being and I cannot overlook the pathetic condition of another fellow human. Please accept the check." The incident added to my already long list of reasons as to why my father-in-law was such a respected and admired man, including his refusal to let me use the official car for the personal reasons. Beautiful. True greatness. It was one of those breakfast talks that are often organized with a group of businessmen. Normally, I would have only heard about them if I had happened to read the business section of the newspaper the day after the event. But in this case, the keynote speaker happened to be one of the major supporters of the non-profit that I worked for, so my presence was required. Finding information on him was surprisingly easy, and I had to read as much as I could on him before the conference. Wikipedia informed me that he was the chairman of the power company that supplies more than 75% of the Hong Kong's power requirement, and of a company that owns hotels that have been voted as some of the best in the world. That's when he has been awarded the knighthood of the Queen Elizabeth II and have been made an officer of the Legion of Honor in the government of France. I found out that he was a fixture on the Forbes list of the world's 200 richest men, and that the foundation that carries his family name gives away huge sums of money to charity. Though I know all there was to know about him, I hadn't been able to find a picture of his. She had no idea what he looked like. I was networking furiously before the talk. When you work for a non-profit, you learn to approach everyone you meet with a potential funder, and launch into your spiel before their attention starts waning. Seeing this well-dressed gentleman next to me, I introduced myself to him and handed him my business card. When he told me his name, I was momentarily taken back. He was the keynote speaker. Before I could recover my poise, he was whisked away. To be honest, I was more than happy to have just been able to shake his hand. 2 hours later, after the talk was over, I was standing near the exit, waiting for my boss to say goodbyes. I noticed the keynote speaker making for the exit. He had shaken all the hands he was required to shake and was on his way out. He caught sight of me and walked across. I am sorry I cut our conversation short so abruptly. Pray continue. He said, I spent the next few minutes talking about my organization and the work we did, and about the difference that this support and contribution was making to us. And he was a patient listener, often interjecting a question or comment, but mostly just taking in what I had to say. He didn't have or hurt me out. I did not tell him a single thing that was not already mentioned in much greater detail in the report we sent him. But he still heard me out because he thought it was the right thing to do. I finally understood the meaning of the word great. Is it any wonder the man is lauded more for his values than for his wealth? Beautiful. Working for people. All my life, I have never worked for anyone except myself. I have worked because I wanted to, keeping the balance between family and work. I have never shirked housework because it was my home, and also have never been without work because somehow work seemed to find me. Even during the 10 years of maternity leave that I took, I produced newsletter for the community that I lived in, ran a library and produced a play. Besides, there's always home that depends 24/7 attention. I never started off with fat salary. When I began my job at Raymond's, I started my salary at 350 rupees, and then I left at reached just rupees 1200. 10 years later at Blue Star, I did reach figures of 3 and 4,000, but soon had to go back to 1200 when I started my teaching career. From then on, it has been a gradual rise till I reached rupees 10,000. In the course of this, I have worked with the heads that were abundant of not giving me the rise, and that was due till Providence compelled them, took the matter out of their hands, and at once tripled my paycheck packet. I've never worked for a position or designation at any time because I never had a high position. I was surrounded by people who I felt I could do something for them, and I simply did it. And for all of them, I simply was Lakshmi. Later, I did get a very big title, teacher. What is the role of the teacher? The same as that of a parent. Bring up children, teach them values, teach them to attain their potential. This is one designation I have cherished and valued the most, and just continued with it. Only the size and the age of the people I taught changed. I've never worked for an organization of people, yet I have very devoted and sincere in my work. In every place I've worked, at the end of the day, I have moved out gracefully with mixed feelings, joy in the warmth and emotion with which people say farewell to me, and sorry because I have to leave. I have also gone back to them when I could and enjoy the pride they feel in my growth. I remember my first boss who literally brought me up from a callow of 18-year-old to a mature 27-year-old, a stern taskmaster who would not be let a spelling mistake or a comma be overlooked. Yet he took as much care of me as my father, paid for my college education, ensured that I escorted home when I worked late, added tremendously to my reading, visited my homes wherever I lived, and ensured that I was happy. I have worked for the students I taught right from 1984 onwards. I still think of them with progress in today's means of communication. They come back after years to ask how are you and say don't give up teaching. I worked for my husband who from the time I have known him took pride in my abilities and gave me the space to work, who never put a stumbling block for whatever I did. I work with a smile on which he sends me to work every morning, and the compliments he gets from the wives of his friends. I work for the pride he takes in my small achievements and the unfailing encouragement to broaden my mind. I work for my children who helped me with my BAD and got me every teaching assignment only when they felt that our being the same school was a hindrance to our progress did I start working in a different school. Today when I stand and look at the fingers pointing at me because I seem to be working for two organizations, I wish I could tell them that I'm only doing what a teacher should do. Teach the ones willing to learn from me. If I have been a good teacher and made a difference to some, I'm working to extend that to many. Did I need to transfer paper or information from one organization to another? Not at all, because in the words of a popular song, I came empty handed and will go always also empty handed, and still continue to work doing what I can. Doing what I can, I work for people that think I can work for them, not for organization. I work for people that are happy to have me working with them and are neither threatened nor insecure of what I may do. I work for people that greet me with a smile, tell me what to do, and at the end of the day let me go home in peace. I work for the people that ask me to do something for them, benefit from it, and simply say thank you. I work for people that accept me and my work. I will always work for people that allow me to work for myself. Beautiful annuities. Life is a process. We are a process. The universe is a process. The Misa in Malaysia. Death visits us in different forms. Sometimes it holds your head down in the water and then inexplicably lets you go. Kunton, Malaysia, 1989. As newlyweds, we were slumming it out of a beach resort. It wasn't the kind with a pool and the French cuisine. Instead, there were shacks of stilts with grass roofs and the mosquito net to keep the warming bugs away at night. The front door open and the whispering suggestion of the streets of Malacca. The back order looked over an ancient Muslim cemetery with frugal headstones jutting out to the petting ground. We went swimming with the local guide. Mohan was a large Tamilian whose lumbering shape belied his ability to swim through the water as he had fins. The seafood served at the hawker stall was the beach, had traces of sand, but it washed down quite well with tiger beer. We weren't at all bothered that the waiter told us that the 3 teenagers had died on this beach 2 days ago and sucked into one of the whirlpools that lurked beneath the placid waters. It was a day of bright sun. On blue waters reflecting the clear sky, we wallowed in the water to surface obliquely for a cool drink or the spice pie, then kept running back through the pottery sand into the gently heaving sea. The evening sun had dipped lower in the horizon when the wave came in. The tide slow at first and then insistently pulled us away from the shore. With every exhalation of the sea. By the end of the day, this rocking motion felt soporific, even as it pulled us far from the shore. Suddenly, Mohan was a dark speck of the vast ocean as the beach retreated very far away. Panicked, my husband and I swam towards the shore, but the pull of the sea was inexorable. My husband, never a strong swimmer, started to tire in the salt water. It became easier to pull him up by his hair of the body grew increasingly limp. It is strange how the mind disengages. 2 months ago, a relative had died in the Delta air crash in Detroit, leaving behind a bride of 6 months. I was remember watching my husband fight the water and wondering how I would tell his family. Watching my husband struggle up to the surface, I thought, how does any woman tell her in-laws that their son is dead? There was no doubt in my mind that I would survive without him. Already felt like an unbearable burden. Then there was the speck of the wet blonde hair swimming towards us, and a man miraculously appeared to our side. Without asking whether we needed help, he towed us both to the safe waters with powerful strokes. When he asked, "Is there anyone else?" I could only point to Mohan, now a bobbing head in the horizon, and of his heavy disappeared into the sea. He learnt later that after Mohan was found exhausted but still alive, and people had helped us to the local hospital, that our behavior was a Hawaiian lifeguard vacationing in Kuton. And none of the people on the beach could hear our cries for help. He had read our body language from the distance of the beach and realized we were in distress. We scorned to the hotels in the area, but we only had a description created out of our terrified minds and not even a name, and we never found him. It was 21 years since that day, yet I still marvel at how close the margins are between death and life. Each anniversary is sweeter because of our memory of that day in Quinton. Its memory would surface easily when a child dashes across the busy street or an old man starts to choke on the morsel of his throat. Never take love for granted, but most of all, the incident in the Quinton taught me the value of this maritime thing. Debts of gold can easily be repaired, but debts of gratitude are carried to the grave. Some debts are indeed carried to the grave. A second chance. January 89. Dear, do you see that? Rabbit asked. I said, tilting my head more to the closer to him than to actually see the stars he was pointing to right there. That's the audience. 4 stars on the outside and 3 in the line on inside. Yeah, I could see it all right. But my heart wasn't beating that loud because of the star. I was 16. It was the first time I had ever stood so close to him. A strange concoction of emotion. Despite the racing pulse and throbbing heart, there was serenity in the whole moment, a feeling of belonging, of coming home. 4th January 2002. 9. Dear, can you see that? I asked. No, where? Said my sweetheart, my darling daughter, all of 10. Dear Tanya, the 4th star, make a square and a 3 inside out in a line, I said, pointing up while giving my swing a push. Who told you about that consolation? She asked. Consolation? It's the Orion, I corrected. My boyfriend told me a long time ago, and the one with the Dracula teeth. But Marsh Bacha, see if you can go higher than this. I pushed my swing higher and both of us busted laughing. 5 February 2009, one new message on the Facebook. Rampage Sabrabal, 4 January, 9:41 p.m. Hi, you are a tough one to find. Read all the reviews about your work. Awesome. Wanna get in touch? On a recent vacation to the US with my family, my brother had asked me if I ever bumped into Rambi, my ex-boyfriend, or if I knew anything about him. I had replied saying, these kind of things happen only in the movies, not in real life. I guess that was the time when I finally allowed myself to think about him again. The recess of my mind opened up just to be with, still careful not to let the light through, and slowly I had the courage to talk about my past, the part of my life that I had sliced off and pretended never existed. And now, after 13 years, this message on Facebook, my world was swirling. Would it have been different if Rambir and I had finally gotten married? If he hadn't made me wait 7 years for a commitment? If I had been a little more patient? If we hadn't had a fight? If he hadn't gone away to the ship? If he could have at least amicably said goodbye? Would it have been different if I hadn't subsequently met Sanya's father? If Sanya's father hadn't balmed my aching heart and taken me under his wing? Would it have been different if I had been more cautious of our age difference and his seemingly ineligibility due to the past failed marriage and 3 children? I remember I was hurting and ready to take on the world for love. But then again, I was so much to learn. I wouldn't know so many things had I not gone through whatever I did. I wouldn't have known what freedom meant until I had borne the marks of that first strike from the one I thought would lead me into my salvation. I wouldn't have learned how to bear till I thought I couldn't bear anymore, and then go ahead and learn to bear some more. I wouldn't have known the pain in love if I hadn't loved and lost. I wouldn't have learned how to pick up the pieces. I wouldn't have learned that my soul is far from being battered. If I hadn't gone through what I did, I wouldn't have learned how to ultimately forgive Sanya's father for the public humiliation and forced carnal pleasures. I wouldn't have known how to forgive him for the drunken brawls and the bruised skin. I wouldn't have learned that the skin heals much faster than the scars on the heart. But most importantly, I wouldn't have learned that the heart too does heal. I wouldn't have learned to move on, and in moving on, I wouldn't have found how life makes a turnaround. If I hadn't gone through whatever I did, I wouldn't have known the moment that would make me hold her in my arms from very first touch, her cry, her gurgle. I wouldn't have known her first suckle of my body and the umbilical bond that she would form with my soul the moment the cord was cut from my womb. I wouldn't have known how my heart would break when I would stand at the threshold of justice, facing a battery of lawyers, fighting against the embarrassment of the riches that he holds and the strength that he shows in ripping the one joy I would clutch tight in my arms. In that moment, I wouldn't have known the will of a mother and the strength of the character to stand up and against all odds that were and will ever be. I wouldn't have known how to survive, and I wouldn't have known that what a win that would be. If I hadn't gone through whatever I did, I wouldn't have learned to hold on and to hang in there and fight the temptation to run away. I wouldn't have known the dark. As I stared into the night, and I wouldn't have known the tree, that there would eventually be light. I wouldn't have known how to find faith within myself, and I wouldn't have learned how to hold on to it. Though life may not have been gotten easier with time, I wouldn't have known that the strife would nurture me fine. I have been a few more months since the message from Rambir. I have since learned that he got married soon after our breakup, and after a 9-year-old daughter, Sugandha, the apple of his eye. He is the captain of the ship now. Though life hasn't been too kind to his relationship with his wife, they are divorced. We both seem to have paid a heavy price for letting go of what we had. He is coming home later this year, and I am hoping for life to give me a second chance, a chance to say goodbye and finally move on. Beautiful. A second innings. Browsing in a bookstore in Lucknow, a friend came across a book titled Marwada Ki Meshia. Marwada is the name of the place where we stay in Banaras. My friend casually flicked through it and discovered that the book was about my father and how hard he had worked for the people of Marwada to give him a better life. When my friend discovered this book, my father had already been dead in more than 5 years. He had passed away at the age of 68 to cancer, and yet at the age of 37, my father knew he was dying. Sometimes you can feel the death around you, and he felt death around him constantly. He had been unwell for a long time and was just getting weaker. He had started hiccuping all the time, sometimes violently, sometimes softly. His hiccups would not stop even when sleeping, and when he ate, he would vomit if there was a violent hiccup, and the accompanying fever, though low, was persistent. Despite conducting various tests, the doctors could not find the reason behind his strange ailment. 37 was such a young age. 2 of his children were barely reaching their teens, while his youngest was not yet a toddler. A totally self-made man. He had worked hard to make his business a success, living frugally. He built an enviable house so that he was fiercely proud of. He was put into ICU with various tubes in the pipes running in and out of the body. My mother was always by his side, sobbing quietly, constantly. The doctor came in with the latest set of test results. Was perplexed at all the results were mostly clear. He was just constantly hiccuping and unable to swallow anything. No medication of any kind had any effect. He was slowly deteriorating. He was on the drip and classified as a serious case. My father had always been a great devotee of the Hanumanji. On that particular evening, my father felt someone near his bed. There was a rustle and he saw a shadow. He knew, he was absolutely positively sure that it was Hanumanji. Has my time come? Yes, please. My children are small. Give me another 25 years. My father says he felt a hand on his head and then he heard a whisper, your wish shall be granted. The next thing he knew, my father saw his doctor standing near him. He looked around the room. There was no one else. Had it been a dream? Your fever has finally gone down. After a long time, you have finally had a peaceful sleep. His hiccups started decreasing soon after, and a week later, he was discharged from the hospital. He had been declared totally fit. My father used to say that his second lease of life was thanks to Hanumanji. My father prospered, but he never forgot that he was living on borrowed time. If God gave him another chance, we knew he had to do something to be worthy of it and to make him proud. My father involved himself wholeheartedly in charity work. He lived in a place totally dominated by caste democracy, and he worked toward breaking those barriers. He wanted to do more, but what? Education more than anything else. My father believed that education was one of the cornerstones of the strong society, and so he opened a school for underprivileged children. And he went to Sankat Mochan every day to thank Hanumanji for his benevolence and blessings. And that is how my father lived the rest of his life. One morning when he was 60, his responsibilities over, my siblings and I married and well settled, he got a feeling unwell and he had started hiccuping again, and he knew that his time was up. He went to the doctor. Test results showed that he had advanced liver cancer and very little time. My father died after a year. He prayed all the time to Hanumanji, impressed death with happiness. At his funeral, there was about 100 children. There were the children from the school that he had started. There were so many people whom he did not know. We did not know people whom he had helped during their times in crisis. My father had 6 cows, which he regularly fed fresh fruits to at least once a day. With his body was taken out of the house, they all moved together loudly as if it is in farewell to the tribute to my father. Not a single eye was dry amidst the large gathering of the friends, relatives, and well-wishers. I miss my father very much, but very rarely do I dream of him. However, the few times that I have dreamt has always been the same. It is Saturday, and he is immersed in the Sanket merchant, doing seva for his Hanumanji, the god he loved and trusted so much. And if anything, I know that there is where my father's spirit rests today with his beloved Hanumanji. Fine line. H.J. Kennedy poem 7 Deadly Virtues make you think about the fine line between vice and virtue. What he says of good cheer is rather disturbing for anyone who has been through periods of despondency. Good cheer. When grief and gloom are what you want, good cheer is nothing but a big pain in the rear. I have known the efforts it takes to get excited about the beautiful weather outside, leave the familiar confines of the well-worn coach to make the best of the day has to offer. I don't know what I have wanted, grief or gloom, and times like this, but have lacked when it takes to bring good cheer on spontaneously. The craving for uninterrupted quietness and to be left alone was far more than any desire to seize the day. I suffered knowing that my mood would permeate Jay's, diminishing her natural joy devour, that I would feel guilty long after for it. I would want to undo that day, that hour that made some happy memories for my child. When my neighbors knocked on the door to ask, Mummy wants to know if you and I and Jay would like to come to watch my soccer game. Something inside snapped as if strands of gloom had ripped apart by an unexpected burst of happiness, the smiling face of a little girl who wanted me to become part of her day. Beautiful. Wow, amazing. Nice stories. Love it, truly. Awesome. Rainy day in Mumbai. From my window in office, I looked up the dark clouds hovering threateningly, wondering this would be the day the city was waiting for. Then brushing drenched images aside, Vaheguru. On a rainy day in Mumbai, from my windows in office, I looked up at the dark clouds hovering threateningly, wondering if this would be the day the city was waiting for. Then brushing drenched images aside, I added a slide of my presentation with lots of boxes and arrows. Things that my work life was now surrounded by. I stepped out into the dark a full 2 hours later, carrying a small paycheck and a heavy package that I had received from my parents. Bandstand is usually a lovely place. Most days I step out of the office to the beautiful shades of the sunset over the sea, trying to hold my own against the strong wind. It's crowded with huddled couples, eager rickshaws, and the occasional movie unit. Until today was not exactly the same. I squinted to the spot a rundown premium Padmini amidst the drizzle, crossing the road twice to my luck on both sides. No one wanted to make a trip. Finally, I flagged down to the auto rickshaw and hurried into it, cardboard box and all, asking him to make me to the farthest point in the city to which he was allowed. He passed by the seashore, the radio blaring, Barso se mega mega. I hummed along. The sea breeze blowed the shortest strands of my hair all over my face. The superb, dramatic alter ego was busy fancying myself as the pretty heroine under the gorgeous waterfall splashing around and getting drenched without a second thought. I put aside outside the rickshaw and to watch the rain